Australia has sounded the alarm about Iran's long arm, exposing an IRGC plot to wipe out anti-Semitism and expelling the Iranian ambassador. And closer to home, we'll take a look at what the IDF operation that is expected to change the face of Gaza City will look like, and how Hamas is preparing for the IDF's entry into that city. And meanwhile, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff revealed that President Donald Trump will hold a big meeting about Gaza at the White House later this week. In the northern arena, it is now final that Hezbollah is not going anywhere. We'll tell you why, and we'll also tell you about the new outpost that the IDF is building in southern Lebanon. And in Syria, an Israeli airstrike near Damascus resulted in 6 fatalities, putting pressure on the ongoing talks between Israel and the al-Julani regime. And meanwhile, Iran's efforts to avoid snapback sanctions by the European states appear to have failed, as negotiations in Geneva broke down over the last 24 hours, with the deadline just a few days away. Predictably, Iran is making dark threats about the terrible consequences for everyone but themselves, and they are also making more threats against Israel, saying any future strike will lead to military, economic, and political escalation. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. The fighting in the Gaza Strip is very close to shifting into high gear, bringing us one step closer to the final phase of this war. Hamas is making hasty preparations for the IDF's penetration into Gaza City, including attempts to prevent the city's residents from leaving the area so that they can continue to be used as human shields. Hamas's strategy is to set up the circumstances for a large number of casualties amongst its civilian population to make sure that Israel will look bad in front of the international media, and in order to launch a delegitimization campaign against the IDF operation, which the world already opposes anyway. And meanwhile, the IDF completed a large operation to destroy underground terror infrastructure in the center of the Gaza Strip over the past few days, and we'll have some more details to share with you about all of that. In diplomatic news, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will give us a look at the negotiations in Geneva between diplomats from the E3, Britain, France, and Germany, and Iran over the issue of snapback sanctions. The deadline of the snapback mechanism is coming up in just a few more days, and the efforts to avert them appear to have broken down. Mati will tell us all about it. In Israel's northern arena, there has been a great deal of activity over the last 24 hours. In Syria, it was reported that 6 soldiers of the Syrian army's 44th Division were mortally wounded when an Israeli UAV struck their positions in El Kisawa in the rural area of the outskirts of Damascus. This will no doubt complicate ongoing discussions between Israel and the al-Julani regime over the deployment of forces near the border, and amongst other issues. And on that note, Defense Minister Israel Katz had a sharp, clear message regarding Israel's position on the Golan Heights, and we'll have the full story. And next door, in Lebanon, Hezbollah has reportedly budgeted $1 billion to repair and rebuild the damage done to Beirut's Dakhia neighborhood in the recent round of hostilities with Israel. I think that's a good idea to rebuild homes and neighborhoods, but the question is, will this money actually be spent on that, or on the Hezbollah headquarters in the tunnels underneath the city? We'll take a closer look at this issue to see what we can find out. And meanwhile, Iran's long arm has been exposed, and Australia is outraged after the exposure of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's links to a series of anti-Semitic attacks against the Jewish community in Melbourne. And Iran's ambassador in Canberra has been expelled, and the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper has revealed the almost comical failures in Iran's plans to attack Jewish sites on Australian soil. The exposure points to problems in the Iranian method of using local crime organizations to achieve its aims. We hope the IRGC continues to make these mistakes, but we cannot count on it, and we'll bring you more details about this developing story. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground. Together with Mati Shoshani, we are bringing you everything that you need to know on day 691 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we continue, I want to thank you for all the support and invite you to continue helping us spread the truth. We are fighting a tough war so that the truth will reach as many people as possible. And every bit of your help gives us the fuel to continue, really. So leave a comment, give a like, click that subscribe button. If you want to do more, invest in help us share the truth and create more content from Israel, you can visit www.tbn.org/standwithisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/standwithisrael. You can also hit that donate button on YouTube. And now, let's get into today's news. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced over the last 24 hours that the Iranian ambassador will be expelled after the Australian intelligence agency determined that Tehran is behind at least 2 anti-Semitic attacks against the country's Jewish community. This is a big story, and we're going to take a closer look later in this report. But first, let's review the latest developments in the Gaza Strip. Forces of the Southern Brigade under Division 143, including the Yalam Combat Engineering Unit, completed an operation to destroy terror infrastructure and underground routes in the center of the Gaza Strip over the last several days. As part of the activity, the forces exposed and destroyed 2 offensive underground routes and eliminated dozens of terrorists in the area, with the aim of expanding the security zone along the border in the center and the south of the Gaza Strip. These were part of a broader effort to continue wide-scale preparations ahead of the ground operation that will be carried out in about 3 weeks. Also, part of this effort has been the activity in the Zaytun neighborhood and on the outskirts of Gaza City that is part of the early stage of the plan, whose goal is to test and neutralize Hamas's capabilities. One of the main challenges is the city's high-rising buildings, which serve the organization as a defensive and also an observation line. Alongside this, the city maintains vital infrastructure such as water, electricity, and communications, and distribution networks, which require careful planning before this operation kicks off to avoid casualties. In parallel with the military preparations, the IDF has already begun the stage of establishing infrastructure in the tent cities, to which between 850,000 and 1 million residents who will be evacuated from Gaza City are expected to move. After that, additional distribution centers will be established, and then evacuation plan will begin in parallel with the first military action, encirclement of the city. The evacuation will be carried out by humanitarian corridors, leaflets, Arabic language media, and an official IDF announcement, followed by other measures. After the completion of the evacuation or the removal of most of the population, the order will be given to the Air Force to carry out targeted strikes to destroy terror targets. Only then will the ground maneuver begin, which will include fighting above and below the ground. And in parallel with the IDF's operations, Hamas is also organizing for combat. According to the intelligence reports, Hamas terrorists are working to prevent Gaza residents from leaving the city, threatening the besieged civilians and instructing operatives to block all access routes for exit. Hamas's goal is to leave as many residents as possible inside the city so that they will serve as human shields that will thwart the IDF's ability to operate freely on the ground and, on the other hand, harm Israel's image when most people around the world will blame Israel for the high civilian death toll. The recent incident at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis has added fuel to this narrative, despite Israel's explanation and the fact that, under international law, the Hamas terrorists operating inside the hospital made it a legitimate target for the IDF fire. This did not stop many governments, including traditional friends of Israel like Germany, from condemning the IDF. Hamas sees this, and they know that they can use this trick again and again and again, and Israel will get condemned every time. Now, we are keeping our focus on Gaza, but shifting slightly south to the border with Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. In the last 24 hours, Egypt updated Israel and the United States on its intention to increase its military presence in the northern Sinai area, in the area adjacent to the Gaza Strip, despite the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. The forces, according to the sources, will enter armed and deploy along the entire border to prevent infiltrations and control a scenario of mass population movement southward. In Egypt, they warn of a real danger in the event that hundreds of thousands will try to flee from Gaza City towards the already crowded southern parts of the Gaza Strip. As a side note, there has been some chatter on Arabic-language social media platforms that Egypt is sending this force to the border with Gaza as part of preparations to punish Israel for its war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. This chatter has been gleefully picked up and amplified by many influencers in Western countries, who would obviously like to see Israel get attacked by Egypt. If you're one of those influencers, I'm sorry to have to tell you, but Egypt is not going to attack Israel to punish us for fighting against Hamas. On the contrary, the only reason that this Egyptian military force is being deployed to the border with Egypt and Gaza is so that they will be in place to prevent the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip from fleeing the war zone of Gaza into Egypt. The Egyptians have no compassion whatsoever for the Palestinians, and they never have. They don't want Palestinians in their country, just like all the oil-rich countries in the Middle East do not care about them and have historically refused to accept Palestinian refugees and otherwise done little to help them. What do you think about all this situation? I'm very curious to hear, so let me know in the comments section. And now, we are moving on to diplomatic developments regarding Gaza. The cabinet decision will be held for the first time this week since Hamas signed off on a proposal for a partial deal to release some hostages in return for a 60-day ceasefire. However, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu might not even bring the proposal up for discussions after Israel set a clear line for a comprehensive deal only under Israel's conditions. Israel's new strategy to refuse a partial deal stems from American pressure under the Trump administration, which refuses to hear more about partial deals, and also from an understanding in Israel that a partial deal will certainly abandon the lives of those remaining at the hands of Hamas for the second part of this deal. So, please guys, continue to spread the truth, share and follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to help us create more content. This is how we do it, with your help. So, if you want to help us create more videos, keep you updated from Israel, please visit tbn.org/standwithisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/standwithisrael. We are fighting this war for the narrative and for the truth, and we need your help. So you can do that by visiting our website or by hitting the donate button on YouTube. And now, we are switching our focus to the northern arena, where Hezbollah's media mouthpiece, the El Akbar newspaper in Lebanon, reported on Tuesday morning that there are at least 8 Israeli outposts in southern Lebanon and not 5, as the Lebanese army is claiming. The military source cited in the report said that Israel recently established 3 additional outposts. 2 of them are in Batalat el-Mafar on the outskirts of El Adaisa, and another outpost in El Dawir in the Lebanese village of Hula. And according to the source, Israel continues to maintain its outposts inside Lebanon. These claims were published a few hours after the speech of Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem. The Hezbollah leader sent a threat towards the Lebanese government and said that it is no longer in charge of Lebanese sovereignty unless it reveals its decision to disarm Hezbollah. This presumably came in response to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's declaration that Israel will reduce its presence in Lebanon if steps are taken to disarm Hezbollah. Qassem also called on Israel to leave Lebanese territory, stop the airstrikes on terrorist Hezbollah organization outposts that sends on missions to rebuild its ability to harm Israel, and release Hezbollah terrorists who are currently in Israeli prisons so that they can be free to continue terrorizing Israeli citizens. He added that Israel must first implement the agreement, and only then will we discuss the defensive strategy. What do you think, guys? Are Qassem's requests reasonable? Should Israel agree to his demands? Let me know what you think in the comment section. And now, we'll move to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani. But before we do that, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So Mati, everybody is wondering what's going on with Iran. The deadline for European snapback sanctions is approaching, and reports from the talks in Geneva meant to avert these sanctions appear to have been broken down. If the Iranians do not announce their agreement to major concessions by August 31st, the European powers will reimpose the sanctions that will have a devastating effect on Iran's already struggling economy. Meanwhile, Iranian leaders never stop making threats against Israel, while the ongoing heat waves, droughts, and electricity shortages make life miserable for millions of ordinary people in Iran. So, Mati, what does the future hold for Iran and for the region?
That is a great question, Yair. Look, just 5 days to go, and in Geneva, representatives of both Iran and the E3+, the EU met and broke up without a decisive result. Now, according to diplomatic sources, the meeting wasn't a complete disaster, but no practical Iranian steps were put on the table, which is a big issue. Now, this lack of movement sharply raises the odds that Europe will, in the coming days, move to activate UN snapback sanctions. Now, the ultimatum is clear. If by the 31st of August, Iran has to agree to renew talks directly with the US, and then it has to fully let IAEA inspectors back into the country, including into facilities that were damaged back in June, and account for about 60% of the enriched uranium that's still in Iranian hands. Now, if they don't, Europe says it will impose UN sanctions, and that is the state of the play or the big move that we're looking at tonight. So what is Europe demanding? And what happened in Geneva? Let's break it down because there are a lot of moving pieces here. So here's a simple checklist that Europe gave Tehran. The first thing is resume negotiations with Washington. Directly talk to them, not just through intermediaries. The second big piece is restore full IAEA monitoring, with access to the sites, specifically those hit in June, and to materials that the agency has asked to see in the past and been denied. The third piece is disclose and verify the 60% enriched uranium stockpile, where it is and at what quantity. Now, diplomats say that the E3 may slightly extend the deadline only if Iran actually starts direct US talks and restart IAEA oversight. And as of tonight, after the Geneva meeting, sources say that no concrete Iranian proposals were offered or placed on the table. Tehran's public line asked the E3 and the UN Security Council to give diplomacy more time. And it argues that the Europeans have no legal grounds to trigger the snapback mechanism. So here's what Europe says in reply to them. The time is almost up. It's time for Iran to take action and time for things to move forward. So let me explain what a snapback mechanism actually means. It means restrictions on ballistic missile activity and related technology. It means that assets are frozen and travel bans are imposed, and authorization for states to directly search Iranian aircraft and ships for prohibited items around the world. This process favors restoration, and once it's triggered, the Security Council must vote to keep the sanctions relieved. In other words, it's automatic. And if that vote fails, the old sanctions snapback will automatically. The E3 time window is very narrow. Its 2015 UN decision expires on October the 18th. In September, Russia holds a rotating council presidency. And in short, if Europe pulls the lever this week, stopping the snapback mechanism will be incredibly hard moving forward. So Tehran's message back to the West is wider fronts if Israel dares to strike again. Let's break down what that means. Alongside the diplomacy, Iran's parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Ghalibaf, warned that any Israeli attack will expand the war to new military fronts and into economic and political arenas. This threat sits against the memory of June 12th's 12-day war. Israel carried out hundreds of strikes on nuclear, military, and infrastructure targets inside and around Iran. Iran fired missiles and drones at Israel. Most were intercepted on the way, with only a few of them causing damage and casualties within Israel. Now, since then, many observers have assessed that the ceasefire is temporary, with both sides preparing for possible renewed actions. And in the same breath, Tehran urges the E3 and the UN to delay punitive steps, insisting on its nuclear rights, and claims that Europe lacks legal standing to activate the snapback mechanism. That is Iran's pressure track alongside its diplomatic ask. In summary, there is a lot on the table that's posed against Iran, and they need to make a decision, and they need to make it quick in the next couple of days on whether or not they're trying to buy time or are willing to really enter a negotiation. Will Iran be able to put a deal on the table, present written steps? Will the US engage in direct talks with Iran? Will the IAEA gain access again to Iranian facilities and a verifiable map of where the 60% enriched uranium is? Or will the E3 snap back the mechanism on Iran, imposing sanctions once more? Once again, the deadline is August the 31st, which is next week in just a few days, and then another deadline in October. But once the sanctions are moving, once the snapback mechanism is in place, the time truly starts running out for the Iranians. And my hope is they end this process without the ability to restore their nuclear program.
Wow, Mati, thank you for bringing some clarity to these issues. Now, we're keeping our focus on Iran because this week has seen some more dramatic developments in its relationship with the Western powers. In the past year, Australia has seen a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incidents, including verbal and even physical attacks on Israeli tourists. Now, the Australian government has announced that it has evidence that some of these attacks were prompted by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Because of this, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced early on Tuesday morning that his government will expel Iran's ambassador from the capital, Canberra, and according to him, these are extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression by a foreign state on Australian soil. Albanese went on to say that the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, ASIO, determined on the basis of reliable intelligence that the Iranian government was responsible for attacks on the Adat Israel synagogue in Melbourne in December and on the restaurant Louis Continental Kitchen. He added that the assessment is that Iran also directed additional attacks, and these were attempts to undermine social cohesion and sow division in our community. This is inconceivable, and the Australian government is taking strong and decisive steps in response. And furthermore, alongside the decision to expel the ambassador, Albanese announced the suspension of the activity of Australia's embassy in Tehran and clarified that all Australian diplomats are already safely in a third country. The Australian government has also advised all its citizens to leave Iran as soon as possible. ASIO chief Mike Burgess added that the Iranian Revolutionary Guards worked through a chain of intermediaries, including local crime syndicates, street gangs, in a similar pattern to what has been observed in European countries over recent years. He added that ASIO does not believe that Iran is behind every act of anti-Semitism in Australia, but other incidents are being investigated. He concluded by saying that Iran's actions are unacceptable. It endangers lives, sowed fear in communities, and tore at our social fabric. Iran and its proxies lit the matches and fanned the flames. And because of all of this, the Revolutionary Guards will be added to Australia's list of officially designated terrorist organizations, and the government will consider promoting other specific legislations against them. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman issued a response to Australia's claims, following which Iran's ambassador was expelled from the country, and said that inappropriate action in the diplomatic arena will receive a counter-response from Iran. Our colleagues are examining the issue and deciding on the appropriate type of response. And regarding the anti-Semitic allegations, he said that the accusations of anti-Semitism is completely rejected, since such a concept does not exist in our culture, our history, and our religion, and it is mainly a Western and European phenomenon. The persecution of Jews in history was an issue connected to Europe, and they should be held accountable for it. I, Yair Pinto, cannot allow that comment to pass unchallenged, because the Islamic revolutionary regime, which this man works for, has been unapologetically fanning the flames of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hatred all over the world for decades. For him to say that anti-Semitism doesn't exist in the culture and in the history of this regime is a catastrophically absurd lie. And although I am sure that he's just doing his job by repeating it, he should nonetheless be ashamed of himself. And speaking of people doing their jobs, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also had a statement on all of this, declaring on Tuesday evening that a few days ago I appeared several times in Australian media and attacked the conciliatory position of the Australian government against anti-Semitism. I'm pleased that today Australia decided to expel the Iranian ambassador after it was revealed that Iran is behind 2 anti-Semitic incidents in the country. This is the first step and hopefully not the last. I agree with the statement of the Prime Minister of Israel. And I'm also doing my job this morning despite being a little bit sleepy. You see, along with millions of other Israelis, I was rudely awakened early this morning by the alerts on my phone and the sirens alarms telling me that it's time to rush my family to a bomb shelter because the Houthi terrorist regime in Yemen had fired yet another ballistic missile at us. The IDF did its usual good job by intercepting the missile, resulting in no damage and no casualties, thank God. But it's notable that the pace of incoming missiles from Yemen appears to be picking up a little, as the last one was just on Friday, and already we're getting another on early Wednesday morning. Now we are switching our focus back to northern arena, when the United States is working to promote a security arrangement between Israel and Syria. The Syrian channel El Akbariya reported overnight between Tuesday and Wednesday that 6 Syrian soldiers were mortally wounded in an Israeli strike that was carried out by a UAV in El Kisawah in the rural area of the outskirts of Damascus. For now, the IDF has not confirmed that it struck there, but according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which holds a reliable network of informants throughout Syria, the soldiers were from the 44th Division of the Syrian Army, and several other Syrian soldiers were wounded in the strike. This follows a complaint by the El-Julani regime earlier in the week that Israel sent 60 soldiers into its territory near Mount Hermon in a violation of its sovereignty, so-called. The IDF said that the soldiers carried out a routine operation in southern Syria, but not in Bet Jan, an area close to the border with Lebanon and near Mount Hermon. These reports came after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met on Sunday in Jerusalem with the United States Special Envoy to Syria and Lebanon, Thomas Barak. This is as part of Washington's efforts to promote a security arrangement that will include Israel and the two countries. Also, present at the meeting were Morgan Ortagus, the former United States envoy to the region, National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi of Israel, and United States Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Elsewhere, El-Julani reportedly met with Arab media figures and former ministers in the field of information recently, telling them about advanced discussions on a security agreement between Damascus and Tel Aviv. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report day by day on all of these Israeli fronts. So stay tuned to the truth in real time by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can help us create more content and be part of the team here in Israel by going to our website at www.tbn.org/standwithisrael or by hitting that donate button here on YouTube. Again, that's tbn.org/standwithisrael. And most importantly, guys, this is a spiritual war. So the best thing that you can do in this situation is pray. Unite in prayer. It works. God is listening, thank God. Pray for the soldiers that are preparing to enter Gaza City. Pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders in this situation, to the leaders of Australia that are dealing with the Iranian regime now. Pray for all the innocent lives that are affected by this conflict. Also the people in Gaza, in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon. This is a hard thing for me to say, but pray for Israel's enemies. Not to succeed, but to have love for the Jewish people and for the people of Israel and for God to have a change in their hearts. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.